I didn't realize I'd seen a ghost until almost 30 years later. And even that wasn't the full story. The truth was, almost 30 years ago, I not only saw a ghost, but I spoke to one. The realization hit me on a packed subway car at approximately 6:15 in the morning. I was on my way to work with all the other early risers. The nurses with their spotless sneakers, the construction workers with their boots so caked with plaster that there was never much of a reason to clean them off. I suppose we weren't all early risers. A few of us looked like we had yet to go to sleep. Some of us looked like we only got on to find a warm place to shut our eyes for a moment. That was the scene. Those were my surroundings when I finally started to comprehend that so many years earlier I had seen and talked to a ghost. I was reading a special report in the latest Now magazine. The article was a history of Toronto Island. The island had flooded the past season, so there was a lot of interest in it. As I sat reading the article through the grog of the early morning, I began to recall my first memory of going toward the island as a child. One of my school friends, Brian, lived on the same street as me growing up. He has since moved to Sudbury and we lost track of one another. But in those youthful summers, we were inseparable. My folks would let me go spend the afternoons and evenings at Brian's house. Brian's folks had a pool, so we'd just spend most of the day splashing around. One day, as the end of the summer approached, Brian told me that his parents had decided to move up north. His family would be moving to Sudbury in a few weeks. Sudbury was only about a 5-hour drive north from where I lived, but to my 8-year-old mind, he might as well have been moving to the ice sheets of Antarctica. As the final weeks of summer melted by, Brian invited me over for a sleepover. His dad also had a boat and wanted to take us out on Lake Ontario early in the morning. I had never really had too much experience on boats, so I was pretty excited. Brian's dad was named Elf, which I thought was pretty funny. There wasn't too much alien about him, except the abundance of hairs he had sticking out of his ears. Brian used to say that these were his antennas, so he could communicate with his home planet. I didn't know about that, but Elf woke us up dark and early and brought us to a boat launch in Port Credit. It was pretty impressive watching him and Brian launch the boat. A bunch of other fishermen were waiting to use the launch, and I was amazed by how well father and son worked together to quickly get the boat off the back of the trailer and into the water, ready for the adventure. When the boat was in the water, Elf gave me a rope to hang on to so the boat wouldn't float away while he pulled the trailer out and parked his truck over by the hockey rink. Brian was already on the boat and making preparations to start our trip. As Elf was handing me the rope, he said, "Now whatever you do, don't let go of this rope. You see that mist out there on the horizon? If you drop this rope, then Brian in the boat might just drift out there and get swallowed up. So don't drop the rope, okay? Brian is my only son and I kinda like him." He gave my hair a tussle and then went to park the truck. I turned to Brian, holding the rope gingerly. "I'm all you've got. If I drop this rope, you'll spend eternity in the midst of the Toronto Triangle." We both laughed. As we headed east along the shoreline, I lost myself in adolescent fantasy. Through the thick mist, I imagined pirates and sharks. Not ghosts, though. I had never been on a boat. I lost myself in the waves and cold spray on my face. "Land ahoy!" Brian yelled, bringing me back to reality. Elf explained. "That's Port Island. Don't we need to pay for a ferry to get to the island?" I asked, referring to the only way I'd ever gotten there. "Not when we have our own ferry," Brian laughed. Elf slowed down the boat and started coasting in with the engine letting out little fits as the boat approached a pebble beach on the south side of the island. I thought I could see a figure walking along the windswept trees behind the beach, but I was soon distracted by Elf. "When we get really close to the shore, I'm going to need you to jump out holding the rope. Just get to the beach and keep holding it. I'll tell you when to pull us in. And make sure you don't get any of that Lake Ontario water in your eyes or mouth. Who knows what will start growing out of you," Brian added, smiling. Back in the 80s, everyone was always joking about what would happen if you swam in the lake. Most of the kids in my school were in agreement with what would happen. Straight up mutation. I readied myself for the task. Elf gave me the go and I jumped off the front of the boat and immediately felt my ankle twist as I fell into the shallows of the lake. Out of instinct, I pulled myself onto the shore before realizing that I had dropped the rope. As I climbed onto the pebble beach, I could hear the engine cut out. Stay right where you are. It may take a few minutes to get the engine going again. You might see us drifting far out, but don't worry. Just stay put and we'll come back to the same spot, Elf instructed. I looked for a spot to sit and dry off a little and found a suitable log washed up on the beach. Unfortunately, it was a pretty overcast morning, so there wasn't much sun to help me dry off. I was having fun either way, imagining that I was a castaway on a deserted island. But I soon discovered that I wasn't alone.
Phoebe? Phoebe? Is that you?
I heard a voice faintly calling over my shoulder. I looked up to see a cloaked figure behind me. I was surprised by the proximity of the figure because the voice had been so faint. A closer look revealed that the figure was an old lady with a hood pulled up. Her skin looked like tissue paper, it was so thin, with many veins and capillaries visible through her cheeks. She also had a wispy white beard. It wasn't unpleasant to look at, as it had such a faint and ethereal quality to it. She asked again. There is no one here but us, I informed the old lady. My friend and his father are having boat trouble, but they should be back any minute to get me.
It's always boat trouble.
She replied.
Boats in the wind, and then the water.
I could help you look for Phoebe if you like, I offered. But I can't go far or else Brian and his dad won't know where to look for me.
Then they will be like me, forever looking. Except my eyes aren't what they once were. I've been looking for so long now.
I looked into her eyes. I couldn't tell you what color they had been, but they were white now. Totally white.
Phoebe?
She called again, out into the lake. I really don't see anyone out there. My name is Will. I go to Springfield Public School.
I had a son named Will. He was all the lake let me keep. The lake took my girls. All the girls I had left. Phoebe!
She called again into the mist.
Phoebe! Phoebe!
I was surprised to find my voice joining her frail call. I was even more surprised to hear my name echo back. William! Did you hear that? I turned to ask her, but there was nobody there. I looked back to the lake and I could see Elf and Brian emerging from the thick mist. Brian was waving. When they reached the shore and tied the boat to the large log I was sitting on, Elf came over to ask me, "Who is Phoebe?" "How many voices did you hear calling for Phoebe?" I asked. "Just yours, Will, just yours. But who is Phoebe?" All I could tell him was, "I don't know." I didn't know. I didn't know for almost 30 years. But sitting on the subway with all the groggy early risers, I finally had my answer. I cut out the article and put it in my wallet where it still stays. I take it out and read it every once in a while. And more than a few times since, I've found myself on the shore of Ward Island. And sometimes I can't resist the urge to call her name. I call it out into the mist.
May 11th, 1862. The island's darkest tragedy. 15-year-old William Ward, son of famous fisherman David Ward, after whom Ward's Island is named, takes his 5 younger sisters, Rose, Jane, Cecilia, Phoebe, and Mary Ann, sailing on the bay. His siblings perish when high winds catch the sail and capsize the boat. 2 days later, William tells an inquest. Phoebe hung on by the side of the boat as long as she could, and then went down. William's mother had already lost 3 daughters in a single night to scarlet fever. She paces the shores for years afterwards, looking out to the lake. Children turn the tragedy into a play, with them calling out Phoebe's name across the water. "Phoebe!" they call. "Phoebe!"